2010s were the decade where technology took over. It had a growing presence throughout the 1990s and 2000s, but in the 2010s, it became an integral part of our daily lives. The internet, phones, social media, file sharing platform, and streaming sites were phenomena that drove the ingratiation of devices into our lives. A technology-driven culture mania was upon us. The dot-com bubble had burst, and a fully realized version of the World Wide Web entered our lives permanently. The technological advancements that emerged at the dawn of the 2010s brought a wave of new age creatives. This statement rang true in many facets of the creative world, especially in the music industry. Technological advancements eliminated many barriers to entry that existed in prior decades. Expensive and specialist studio equipment was no longer required to create music. Upcoming artists could create anything they desired on a laptop through the use of programs such as Fruity Loop, Logic, and GarageBand. Aspiring artists also had the power to share their creations on various platforms. Creation and distribution was now possible from the comfort or struggle of one's home. Millennials had the world at their fingertips and were free to explore the many niches that exist on the far-reaching world of the internet. Many cultural revolutions took place during the 2010s, and the internet was the town centre for these revolutions. One of the cultural shifts that spawned on the information highway was the birth of an internet-based underground hip-hop scene. This new era of underground hip-hop broke every convention that existed. Upcoming artists would pioneer waves, sounds, styles, and aesthetics that would change the rap game forever. In the current day, it's acknowledged that the original wave of underground pioneers are responsible for many of the things seen in today's music industry. But many of the artists who played a vital role in changing the landscape have been lost to deleted files, broken URLs, and banned accounts. The early adopters, the innovators, deserve their flowers, and their flowers are long overdue. The present underground climate is fueled by algorithms, oversaturation, and more subgenres than any sane person can keep track of. Also, the current scale of the underground landscape makes it hard to ascertain how small the underground ecosystem once was. Over the last decade, the few have become the many. This following feature piece will give credence to how the internet underground changed the rap game. It will document its humble beginnings and chronicle its transformation into the genre-shifting behemoth it has become. This is an era of music and free-form creation that deserves the documentary treatment. This article will attempt to provide a timeline of what transpired during this amazing era of music evolution. Before we delve into the annals of internet rap history, we have to pay homage to the first rapper to do everything. Big Draco, aka Soulja Boy, was arguably the first internet rapper, and the first internet rapper to make it in the mainstream. As a 14-year-old, DeAndre Cortez Way began experimenting with music and uploading it to one of the original music streaming sites, SoundCloud. With his internet presence established, Soulja Boy was an early migrator to YouTube and MySpace. It was on these platforms that King Soulja began his ascent to superstardom. After a few years of internet hustling, Draco thrust himself into superstardom with the millennial anthem Crank That. Crank That was a global smash and cemented Soulja in the mainstream scene of the late 2000s. Soulja Boy might not be the first to do everything, but he was definitely the first internet-centric artist to obtain mainstream notoriety. Entering the 2010s, Soulja Boy's mainstream run was dwindling, However, his legacy as the first internet rapper was being further established. During the 2010s, Soulja Boy kept himself relevant in the underground by re-establishing his internet hustle all over again. Soulja kept his finger on the pulse of internet culture and was able to re-emerge as an OG to the new wave of underground superstars. Collaborations with Chief Keef, Lil B, Riff Raff, Ocean Gang, Young L, and Vinny Chase proved just how tapped in Soulja was during the formative years of the new internet underground. During these years, Soulja Boy became a chameleon of sorts, shifting his styles and adapting his sound to what was trending at the time. In the internet underground, Soulja Boy served as a barometer for just how popular a wave within the underground was becoming. If Soulja Boy wanted to work, or if Soulja Boy was emulating your sound, you must have been doing something right. A discussion about internet rap cannot take place without mentioning Soulja Boy. Despite how polarizing he may be, Big Draco was a pioneer in many ways. He was the first internet rapper to blow up, one of the first rappers to do vlogs, one of the first rappers to do live streams, and one of the first rappers to establish themselves on social media. King Soulja is a certified legend. The formative years of internet rap were very rare. The rise of services such as MySpace, DatPiff, internet forums, and rap blogs created an ecosystem that allowed upstart independent artists to thrive. However, these platforms were very primitive and were yet to ingratiate themselves in the lives of everyday rap enthusiasts. The MySpace, DatPiff, or blog era featured a generation of artists who initiated the shift from traditional music rollouts to internet-based rollouts. The luminaries of this era walked so the next generation of underground stars could run. The blog era was vital in showing the next generation that the internet was a viable avenue for aspiring artists. Whilst the blog era was littered with a litany of stars, the group which typifies this period are the Cool Kids. The dynamic duo of Chuck English and Sir Michael Rocks. English, who hails from Detroit, and Mikey Rocks, who hails from Chicago, were two young artists who initially linked up on MySpace. The rest, they say, is history. The Cool Kids broke through and became chiefs of the internet music sphere with their debut EP, The Bag Sale. The classic EP, which features hits such as Black Mag, Mikey Rock, and 88, should be viewed as one of the blog era's formative classics. The virality of their music, swag, and aesthetic illustrated the impact that internet-based movements could have on the tangible world. Chuck English and Mikey Rocks brought back the 90s swag in 2008, several years before it infiltrated Tumblr and the mainstream. Throwback champion NBA jerseys, Jordans, foam posits, King Griffies, starter jackets, snapbacks, and gold chains were brought back into the foray by the Cool Kids and their legion of fans. The Cool Kids embodied retro swag whilst adding a modern twist. Their youthful take on golden age hip hop was a breath of fresh air to the late 2000s hip hop scene. Chuck English's pounding bass and blaring synths brought the boombox ready sounds of acts such as the Beastie Boys, Eric B. and Rakim, and Grandmaster Flash into the 21st century. Whilst the duo's rhymes were littered with references to retro sports players, games, movies, and clothes. Simply put, the Cool Kids were cooler than those guys. The Cool Kids were both revivalists and revolutionaries. They brought back elements of the past and added a youth-infused twist to a bygone era. This combination ushered in a brand new chapter of Golden Age swag. Bringing back the past and adding a millennial invigoration would set the precedent for the future eras of the internet underground. It was a space for innovators and revivalists at the same time. If you wanted to be ahead of the curve, then the underground was the place to be. Conversely, if you wanted to experience the nostalgia of your youth, or even an era you didn't experience personally, then the Internet Underground was your place to reside. The cool kid spree of trend-setting, both sonically and culturally, proved that the new age of artists were creative behemoths. They were trendsetters, risk-takers, and unapologetically themselves. The future of the rap game was no longer being manipulated in record label boardrooms. Instead, it was being created in the bedrooms of the youth. The blog era was a turning point in hip-hop history. The power of the internet was on display to those who were in tune. In the years that followed, life-changing and paradigm-shifting movements would spawn in the underground ecosystem. Other artists who had prominent roles in the blog era include an array of artists who are now considered legends. This includes Chip the Ripper, Currency, Kid Cudi, Dom Kennedy, Nipsey Hussle, Big Sean, Kendrick Lamar, Wale, Mac Miller, Wiz Khalifa, J. Cole, and many, many more. This was a crop of artists who utilized the dawn of the internet age to ignite their careers, create connections, and enhance their creative horizon. These artists were the forefathers of the upcoming internet revolution. As the early forms of social media started to lose their popularity, the platforms that have dominated Web 2.0 were emerging entities. Social media platforms, improved file sharing sites, YouTube, and online forums gave an aspiring artist all the tools necessary to build their brand. An artist could share their music, cultivate their image, connect with their fanbase, and expand their network via the new real estate of Web 2.0. In the late 2000s, the cool kids demonstrated how the internet could revolutionize the hip-hop space. As the internet entrenched itself as an everyday destination for millennials, a slew of artists would utilize the cool kids' DIY blueprint and revolutionize the music industry forever. The founding fathers of the Internet Underground are now modern-day deities. Legendary figures such as Lil B, Odd Future, SpaceGhostPurrp, Chief Keef, Kreayshawn, A$AP Rocky, and A$AP Yams were some of the notable figures who pioneered the several niches of the Internet Underground world. The modern-day deities that shaped the Internet Underground all brought unique elements to the rap game. But there was one overlord who single-handedly founded this wave of internet rap. This was Brandon McCartney, aka Lil B, the bass god. Lil B's bass movement had a mystifying effect on the minds of millennials. His stream of consciousness, bassed flow, androgynous style, outlandish tattoos, bizarre persona, and the overwhelming amount of content that he released made Lil B a prominent figure on the internet. One of the first artists to master the art of going viral, it could be argued that the masses were laughing at the bass god and not with him. But for every horde of haters that invaded Lil B's universe, he also gained several cult-like dedicated followers. Those that were in tune with the bass god were enthralled with Lil B's carefree attitude and god-tier self-awareness. In the early stages of the Internet Underground, Lil B had claimed the spot as the overlord. He was the influence, the guiding light for future artists to follow. His early music encapsulates the spirit and energy of the underground scene. It was DIY chaos, endearing, polarizing, and a combustion of consciousness. Lil B had established a cult-like following and was living proof of how the power of memetics ruled this new internet age. The bass movement was like some Heaven's Gate shit. Without the mass suicides, Nike Monarchs, and Star Trek fanfiction. After a stint with Bay Area group The Pack, Lil B started to spread his bass doctrine across the information highway. Over the span of 2 years, Lil B had expanded upon the blueprint that the cool kids had set out in 2008. Lil B had viral hits, an abnormally large catalogue of work, a cult following who would spread his wave relentlessly, and the rarest persona on the internet. A persona that would fuel his contemporary creatives and the generations that followed. Without his bass movement, the underground and the current composition of the rap industry that we have today wouldn't exist. Lil B's early work doesn't seem as bizarre in the present day, but in the moment, what he was doing was outlandish. Nobody was cooking, freestyle flowing about Ellen DeGeneres or wonton soup, and no rapper was calling themselves a pretty bitch. In today's world, we have mainstream content creators who do whatever it takes for clicks and shock value, and we encounter content that desensitizes us every day. But over a decade ago, Lil B's internet epithets were the embodiment of a shock to the system. Brandon McCartney changed the music world forever. He needs all the accolades possible. If Lil B was the mythical messiah of the early underground, then Odd Future was the embodiment of teenage angst at the time. Lil B's avant-gardisms made it difficult for the everyday millennial to interpret what the fuck he was doing. However, Odd Future's angst-ridden and anarchist brand of rap was exactly what resonated with teenagers in the early 2010s. Millennials spent their adolescence living through the recession. Couple this financial instability with the angst of being a teenager, and you have an environment where Odd Future's angst-driven thematics were the perfect companion for the youth. Odd Future became one of the biggest movements, seemingly overnight, when Tyler the Creator went viral with Yonkers and the Jimmy Fallon performance that followed. Once people flocked to the Odd Future wave, many fans discovered the collective had a plethora of underground gems. Projects such as Mellow Hype's Black and White, Frank Ocean's Nostalgia Ultra, Tyler the Creator's Bastard, and Earl Sweatshirt's eponymous debut Earl were projects that heavily influenced the youth. Odd Future gained mainstream notoriety at Usain Bolt-like speed, but their slew of underground classics cannot be forgotten. These classics had an immense impact on underground fans and creators. Their critically acclaimed projects, relatable aesthetic, and innovative use of the internet gave an air of legitimacy to the internet underground. Odd Future's time in the underground was fairly succinct. Their stint in the trenches was an exhibit of how artists could utilize the tools of the internet to further fuel their movement. Random videos of the crew goofing around, their edgy music videos, and furthering the edginess through their online personas made Odd Future Wolfgang KTA a lifestyle. The power of memetics was again on display. Terminology such as fuck Steve Harvey, fuck two dope boys became synonymous with Odd Future and their fans. It was near impossible to scroll Facebook, Twitter, or Tumblr without encountering someone that had the abbreviation OFWG KTA in their bio. Odd Future was an exhibit of how tribalism played out during the internet boom. The internet gave people the opportunity to further incubate themselves into the tribes or niches that they most desired. The Odd Future movement was a tribe that many millennials aligned themselves with. It was a behemoth during the early 2010s. The internet was littered with clusters of OFWG KTA followers. Millennials, especially those who were creatively inclined, were thirsting for new influences, new sounds, new artists, and they were thirsting for the opportunity to express themselves. The Internet Underground, or swag, weirdo rap as it was once coined, fulfilled this desire for self-expression. The youth flocked to this fresh ecosystem of experimental music, wild personas, and unhinged energy. The bass god led his followers to this unheralded territory, and internet-centric movements such as Odd Future built upon the digital real estate that Lil B had unearthed. The underground colony was still in the feudal ages, But just like Age of Empires 2, resources were being foraged and upgrades were on the way. More modern day deities would emerge and spawn new movements in the underground ecosystem. The initial queen of the internet underground, Kreayshawn, is best known for her viral hit, Gucci Gucci. Before the viral hit, Kreayshawn had been forging her path in the Web 2.0 based underground. Aside from experimenting with music, Kreayshawn was directing videos for Lil B, had formed her own collective, and had ingratiated herself with other underground trendsetters. The first lady of the internet underground was much more than Gucci Gucci. She was a pioneer for women in the male-dominated underground scene. The success of Gucci Gucci led to a record deal. Unfortunately, this deal did not catapult Kreayshawn into superstardom. Instead, it illustrated how out of touch the music industry was during the early 2010s. Sony had signed one of the biggest viral stars of 2011, and they forced her down the traditional label path. No more internet-centric organic growth. No more underground sounds. Instead, there were forced collaborations and a cookie-cutter album rollout. This resulted in a sales disaster which derailed Kreayshawn's career as a recording artist. Her label tenure is an indicator of how the music industry was struggling to package internet-based artists. The traditional promotional rollout for albums did not resonate with an internet audience. The industry was being left behind. They struggled to adapt to the initial MP3 boom, and these struggles continued as the internet ascended. Kreayshawn was the inaugural queen of the underground, one of the first female presences in a male-dominated world. She paved the way for women who hoped to pursue being a creative entity in the internet underground. Kreayshawn's viral peak, her underground roots, and her pioneering spirit make her one of the revolutionaries of the early internet underground. Chief Keef is arguably one of the most beloved artists to emerge from the 2010s. Keef is a unique entity amongst his group of pioneers. This is because he wasn't a part of the internet underground per se, but his influence was so vast that omitting him from a discussion of rap in the 2010s is heresy. Keith Cozart was an influencer on a macro scale. His art impacted the entire world. Without him, the entire rap landscape of the 2010s would be different. Many founders of the internet wave were offshoots of Lil B's influence. Keef was on another plane. The Chicagoans' 2011 project, Back from the Dead, awakened the inner anarchist in us all. Keef hit the scene like New Jack hit ECW. His earnest accounts of Chirac Drillinois, coupled with Young Chop's hell-raising instrumentals, would encapsulate the youth. For those who could relate, Keef became the voice of the streets. For those who couldn't relate, Keef drew listeners into his world the same way NWA had many generations before. The momentum of Back from the Dead led to a deal with Interscope Records and the release of his debut album, Finally Rich. As the years have passed, Keef has found his own lane as a new age Gucci Mane. A prolific street artist who shies away from the bullshit that comes with operating in the mainstream. Keef shattered the glass for street artists in the internet era. All the drill variants you hear today were popularized by Keef and originated in his hometown of Chicago. Without Chief Keef, the modern day rap game would be completely different. The most polarizing figure amongst these underground deities is SpaceGhostPurrp. The much maligned and erratic Dark Lord of the internet underground was one of the biggest pioneers and influences in the underground scene. Despite his immense influence, a myriad of self-sabotaging beefs and incidents has rendered SGP one of the most polarizing figures in the underground history. Whether you love him or hate him, SpaceGhostPurrp had the underground scene on smash. You cannot refuse his influence. In the early 2010s, SGP's vision was in full effect. His brand of oral chaos, which drew influences from 90s underground rap, changed this new version of the underground forever. Fueled by the release of two legendary projects, NASA the Mixtape, and Blackland Radio 66.6, Purrp began implementing his Raider vision. A vision of uniting artists who were focused on reviving the realness of the 90s era. SGP would bring the Raider vision to the ASAP mob, and after his hallmark fallout with A$AP Rocky, he would expand the Raider clan into the biggest force the underground had seen. SpaceGhostPurrp's influence on the underground is far greater than the sound palette he brought to the game. He was living proof that game-changing movements could be founded and maintained on the internet. His role as a tastemaker ensured the 90s wave would be re-established within the new generation of underground stars. Purrp's music was dark and brooding, but he used his platform to shed light on upcoming artists and to pay homage to those that inspired him. The majority of focus tends to be on the missteps of his career. However, it must be remembered that he brought eons of influence to the underground. Purrp is the dark angel, the dark energy to the bass god's positivity. Regardless of SGP's fall from grace, he must be considered one of the founding fathers of the internet underground. A$AP Rocky, A$AP Yams, and the A$AP Mob were another group who used the underground to propel themselves to mainstream fame. Often dismissed in the modern day underground discussion, A$AP did play a role in bringing credence to the internet underground. A$AP brought high fashion into underground culture. Kanye, Lupe, Pharrell, and several other rappers had been wearing high-end in the 2000s, but A$AP introduced Raf Simons, Rick Owens into the internet trenches. The impact of the A$AP mob on modern-day streetwear cannot be denied. Rocky's debut project, Live Love A$AP, is a certified underground classic, with features from underground stalwarts such as main attractions, Fat Tony, Clams Casino, and SpaceGhostPurrp. Rocky will always have ties to the internet underground. The impact of A$AP Yams is not discussed enough. The path he forged for future managers, A&Rs, and tastemakers who were internet-centric was groundbreaking. Yams wasn't a rapper, he was the man with the plan. It was his guidance that transformed Rocky into a star, and his influence that established A$AP as a viable movement. His infectious personality crafted some of the most hilarious tweets to grace the platform, and his unique vision made him a top-tier tastemaker. Before his passing, it was becoming clear that his vision was still in the process of being implemented. With other projects such as Blackout Boys in tow, Yams' mission wasn't close to being finished. We lost him far too soon. A$AP Yams provided the blueprint for managers, A&Rs, tastemakers, and influencers in the internet age. He was a special talent and a trailblazer in his chosen profession. Beyond these founding fathers of the internet underground scene, a whole ecosystem of groundbreaking artists were burgeoning. The early 2010s was the golden age of the internet underground. It was during this era that trends were set, sounds were created, collectives were formed, barriers were broken, and conventions were altered. The rap game and music world underwent a revolution. The digital age was just beginning, and these digital artists ensured that the digital age was here to stay. Long before mainstream attention, a group of weirdos, misfits, and forward thinkers would bind together through social media channels to usher in their untelevised revolution. As mentioned previously, the blog era illustrated the power of the internet in regards to the hip-hop scene. This power grew exponentially with Web 2.0's social media boom. Artists now had several platforms to share, promote, and market themselves on. These platforms, coupled with the establishment of the internet underground, created a golden age of material. Barriers were broken, lives were changed, collectives were formed, rivalries were forged, a community was established, and the music world was changed forever. In the present day, most rap enthusiasts are familiar with the founding fathers of the internet underground, but they lack knowledge of the entire scene during this era, an ecosystem which contains several modern day classics. During the first golden age of the underground, self-expression, experimentalism, and bass braggadocio reigned supreme. It was this era that really set the tone, set the energy, and embraced the connectivity that would remain in the underground for years to come. This period of underground history was very experimental. As stressed before, artists who were in tune with the internet revolution had a bevy of new tools and inspirations at their disposal. The sonic environment of this time is extremely hard to define. Several niches emerged as a result of all this unhinged energy. And there are niches that were established during this era that still exist in the present day.
Describing the online rap world right now, it's tough. It's tough to put it in, to just put it in a box.
Perhaps the sound that best defines this early era of the internet underground, or at least a sound that was warmly received and sensationalized by bloggers at the time, was cloud rap. Cloud rap is a blend of ethereal sounds combined with the drugged out nihilism of the vocalist. The sultry sounds provide you with the feeling of floating amongst the clouds, whilst the drug-induced raps transport you to another dimension. The cloud rap phenomenon was pioneered by the dynamic pairing of Lil B and Klan's Casino, and furthered by acts such as Main Attraction, Eric Dingus, Viper, Keyboard Kid, Friendzone, Suicide Yeah, and Metro Zoo. Many artists and mixtapes incorporated aspects of the cloud rap sound during this era. The aforementioned artists embodied the early cloud rap ethos.
This is cloud rap. We just said, all right, y'all want to call it cloud rap, and let's get it. It used to be about selling the drugs. Now everyone's talking about using the drugs.
Another niche that exploded during this era was based music. Irregardless of what the term based means today, based and based music was all about expressing whatever you desired. The stream of consciousness wave was another style that Lil B pioneered. His myriad of based classics generated the first viral moments of the internet underground. Based music often left listeners confused or ridiculing the current state of rap, whilst those who garnered an understanding and a tolerance of what Lil B was doing discovered a niche full of hilarity, a niche that opened their minds, and a niche that awakened them to the joys of expressing themselves. Based music is one of the most influential niches to spawn from the internet underground. It was key in inspiring future generations to do whatever they wanted. Without Lil B's based classics, there is no lane for artists such as Ugly God, Lil Pump, or Lil Boom to attain success. As Lil B's based classics entered new stratospheres of virality, a whole ecosystem of based music emerged. A-Goth, Young God, Cartier God, Ocean Gang, Riff Raff, 3 Pac, and Soulja Boy were artists who embodied this bass wave during the early internet underground. Bass music can be a sequestering subgenre. Nothing beats the feeling of whipping out rare cooking moves to Ellen DeGeneres. Bassed music and the bassed movement embodied the free thought, stream of consciousness, self-expression that defined this era of underground music. Bassed music was a cornerstone of the early underground scene. The abrasive nature of the subgenre fueled the energy of the underground at the time. Bassed music was far bigger than music. It was a gateway drug to the other layers of the underground ecosystem. Lil B's bass movement is one of the main reasons why the internet underground exists. Its impact is unquantifiable, and its influence still resonates over a decade later.
Bass guy really came about with me doing a lot of bass freestyles, and what a bass freestyle is me kind of rapping from the unconscious, like I'm at, probably at a home studio, very pure, and I'm just getting a chance to release, all my unconscious thoughts without having, because when you write raps, you're kind of thinking about what you're doing, like, okay, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna, get that going. But bass freestyle really, that's probably my truest, like just getting a chance to whatever I want to say. I like my sketches.
Outside of the bass wave, the wave that SpaceGhostPurrp brought was arguably the most influential. Carol City's own SpaceGhostPurrp ushered in a tsunami wave of imitators, revolutionaries, and game changers into the underground space. The Phonk, or the dark subgenre of music that Purrp pioneered, was a portal into the depths of the underground. Purrp burst onto the scene with the release of NASA the Mixtape, a traversal through the intergalactic strip club of the SGP metaverse. The bouncy, villainous DIY sounds of this project drew praise from blogs, forums, and cosigns from prodigious artists such as Kreayshawn. NASA the Mixtape was just the precursor to the forthcoming takeover that was about to commence. This takeover would initiate with Purrp's sophomore project, Blackland Radio 66.6. Blackland is one of the projects that shaped and changed the internet underground generation. The twisted, dark sounds that have become synonymous with SGP were championed on Blackland Radio. His brand of demented lo-fi ushered the Phonk into the internet underground. Blackland Radio established SGP as a deity amongst the underground community. His dark, mystical aesthetic made him the messiah of the underground. Similar to Lil B, it is a strenuous task to attempt to quantify his influence. However, it can't be denied that SGP is one of the most important artists in underground history. SGP brought the Phonk to the internet underground and exerted his influence in numerous ways. His influence spans his music, his taste making, and his persona. Blackland Radio 66.6 created a rapture in the underground. It became a full-fledged revolution once SpaceGhostPurrp emerged from obscurity, linked up with the ASAP mob, founded the Raider Clan, and transformed into the God of Black. As a tastemaker, Purrp gave several iconic artists their start, revived the 90s, and pioneered several underground movements during the early years. His work as a tastemaker rivals the prolific sonic influence that Purrp brought to the underground. This can be largely attributed to his founding of the Raider Clan. Raider Clan appeared to be the master plan, a roster of independent artists united through Purrp's dark aesthetic with the mission statement of bringing the realness of the 90s back to fruition. Purrp had assembled a roster of relatively unknown artists, and these unknowns would grow to become underground legends. At its peak, the Raider Clan roster was composed of Chris Travis, Xavier Wolf, Denzel Curry, Amber London, Young Simi, Kenayada, Nell, Lil Champ Fue, Jay Green, and many, many more. Whilst these artists started off as unknown entities, under Purrp's wing, the Raider Clan became one of the most powerful forces in the underground. Purrp's vision of a revolutionary group focused on reviving the 90s era of southern rap was in full effect. Raider Clan's roster spanned the whole USA, and even South Africa for a little bit. The power of the internet was heavily evident in the Raider Clan era. It gave artists the chance to connect with each other and amplified the ability of fans to feel connected with the artists they love. The cultism and tribalism that was present in the fandom of Lil B and Old Future was present in the fandom of SGP and the Raider Clan. The music and ethos of the Raider Clan was a life-changing movement for those who were tapped in. The Raider Clan's coded hieroglyphics, DIY aesthetic, revolutionary commandments, and the stark darkness of the crew created a movement that felt more like a secret society than it did a music group. Being a Raider Clan fan in 2012 meant you're changing your A's to V's, your E's to X's, draped out in all black, and you were commenting watching this in 144p on every Raider Clan YouTube video. The chaotic yet cohesive nature of the early Raider Clan changed the underground forever. The movement spawned several underground superstars and laid the blueprint for many, many more. Purrp's ability to recruit the right artists to rep the Raider Clan and purvey his revolutionary mission statement exhibited his transcendent ability as a tastemaker. Purrp created a dark frenzy with his own releases, but he was able to double the impact by creating a whole group under his dark guise. SGP's legacy as a tastemaker extends far beyond his ability to spot and proliferate upcoming talent. His Lost Tape series and Purrp and Chopped Lucy's feature eclectic track lists that undoubtedly shaped the music taste of those who were listening. The tapes featured gems from the 90s, such as No Limit Records, Cash Money Records, gems from the 2000s, such as Mos Def, Max B, and some alternative gems from Tangerine Dream, Erykah Badu, and SWV. What SGP did during this era was far greater than ushering in the Phonk or the dark side of the underground. He also paid homage to the legends that came before him and blessed them with a whole new generation of listeners. Purrp was a tremendous revivalist, trendsetter, and an elite tastemaker. He should be attributed with a ton of credit for bringing the 90s to the internet generation. However, SGP's moral tenets and his persona would contribute to a beef that split the internet underground for a very long time. His short-lived yet iconic tenure with the ASAP mob came to a contentious end. Accusations of style stealing and many other incidents created a rift between SpaceGhostPurrp and the ASAP crew. In what now seems like a footnote of rap history, this beef was extremely heated and marks the period the once harmonious internet underground became fractured. The battle lines were drawn. It was the OG underground heads who mainly sided with Purrp and the Raider Clan, up against the hype beasts who mainly sided with ASAP. It was now the underground versus the world. Despite his tarnished reputation in the present day, Purrp and the Raider Clan brought the Phonk to life, and the influence of this movement still resonates. It all started in the early days of the internet underground, the genesis. The Phonk or Darkside ecosystem of the 2012 underground spans beyond Purrp and the Raider Clan. One of the hallmark projects from this ecosystem was Lil Ugly Mane's Mr. Thug Isolation. Lil Ugly Mane's legend was established with this project, and the critically acclaimed Dynamo found a home amongst the trenches of the internet. Raider Clan stalwarts Chris Travers, Xavier Wolf, Denzel Curry, Lo Champway, Amber London, Nell, Kinayada, and Young Simi all blessed the underground with Darkside projects. Bones was releasing music under the moniker That Kid and spawned in the Darkside Phonk ecosystem of the underground. SpaceGhostPurrp's ushering in of the Phonk also ushered in a new wave of producers into the underground scene. Producers such as Voodoo's, DJ Smokey, Mr. Cisco, and many more would take the Phonk sound to new heights. With their blend of video game OST samples, haunting Memphis vocal chops, and speaker-breaking 808s. The role of the producer cannot be understated, and in the years that followed, producers would begin to shine as both solo acts and as complementary acts to other underground artists. SGP, the Raider Clan, and the Darkside ecosystem was a force to be reckoned with during this early underground era. They brought the 90s to the internet generation. It was a movement that unified the internet underground and illustrated the inherent power of the internet to create, spread, and proliferate niche communities. The Darkside or the Phonk ecosystem was a spiritual successor to the crazy Memphis rap scene of the 90s. Couple the Phonk wave with the bass revolution, and the internet underground had two game-changing pillars to build upon. These two pillars, along with the other niches that existed during the first golden age of the underground, were the foundations that changed the rap game forever.
Give respect where it's due, you know, like SpaceGhostPurrp really was like the driving force for that shit at the time when he first came out. And when it came down to Raider Clan and the whole aesthetic and everything before we disbanded, like we was really trying to bombard the industry on some shit. Like when we was young and we was all in high school at the time.
Another niche that formed during the early underground was swag rap. Essentially, swag rap was an amalgamation of the sonic trends in the underground, mixed with content and rhyme schemes based around the typical rap tropes of fucking hoes, doing drugs, and getting fly. Except with swag rap, every braggadocious slider was turned up to 1,000. The hoe fucking was extra prolific. The drug experimentation was gnarlier than Woodstock during the 70s, and the drip was extraterrestrial levels of fly. Despite its name, swag rap wasn't versed in being too cool. It was about being yourself and expressing whatever the fuck you thought was cool. In the underground, being free, being yourself, was the new cool. It wasn't about having the freshest teaser snapback. It was about doing it your way and doing it with confidence. Eclectic Miami collective Metro Zoo best exhibit the aura of swag rap. During the early internet underground, their prolific output of mixtapes, art, and videos made them one of the pioneering acts of this era. Members Lofty 305, Ruben Slick, Mr. B, and Freebase, also known as Posh God, would release a series of solo and group projects which would pervade the experimental nature of the underground wave. Metro Zoo were the modern day hippies of the rap game, as they championed experimentalism in all forms of their art. Their visuals were like a never-ending LSD trip. Their music projects were genreless, incorporated a bevy of sounds, and were laced with references to shroom tea and talking debaucherous about the finest that Miami had to offer. Their iconic artwork had a visceral impact on the underground, and it set Metro Zoo apart from other collectives of the time. The Miami collective were like the antithesis of Raider Klan's dark energy, even though they had a brief stint with their Miami-based cohorts. Metro Zoo was the chaotic light to the trippy underworld, and the Klan were the gateway to the dark Phonk. In modern times, their prolific work, classic mixtapes, and groundbreaking art appears to be forgotten about, with the majority of their music absent from major streaming platforms and a large amount of videos lost in the vortex of the Wayback Machine. It seems like Metro Zoo are the forgotten stars of this early internet underground period. Despite this, it must be stressed that the Zoo had an enormous impact on the scene during this period. Their earnest portrayal of their carefree lifestyle through art, music, and video inspired future generations to pursue the experimentalism that Metro Zoo championed. If there was to ever be a museum installation of the underground, the Zoo Mansion and the Metro Zoo Lamborghini need to be exhibited. A whole roster of artists existed in the greater Zoo family. Strength, Nag Champa 305, Al Ray, Mike Deese, Robbie Dread Eyes, and the Shuttle Life movement were some frequent collaborators with Metro Zoo. The Zoo still have a cult following, but their early work oozes a potential that was never truly fulfilled. They were just too ahead of their time. They pushed the boundaries of rap experimentalism into an uncharted territory. Once you immerse yourself in the Koki Shaw's Posh Gang Zooverse, it's hard to escape. Other artists who displayed the swag rap ethos include X Squire, Flatbush Zombies, Rob Banks, Black Cray, Riff Raff, 2-9, and a host of other artists. Any artist at the time who was embracing the various sonic trends of the underground and amalgamating them under their boastful, braggadocious rhymes were purveying the art of swag rap. Swag rap was the only place where a Witch House inspired beat could collide with a barrage of references to PS2 games and Pokemon cards. Swag rap perfectly encapsulates the chaotic energy of the internet underground during 2012. Everything was on go.
AKA put it in your bitch mouth.
Yes.
You already know that. Mr. B the Postronaut, AKA fuck your bitch in all galactic dimensions.
Big
You already know what
church.
it is. Maserati space swag nigga. What's up?
Church.
Lofty 305. Every bitch is type of guy.
Yeah.
And I'm high off through the shrooms.
Yo,
Wait a
Ruben
minute.
Slit, nigga, what they do?
Alright. So
A$AP Rocky pioneered a new era of fashion rap. Fashion rap essentially took the sonic stylings of the underground and merged them with the avant-gardisms of the high fashion world. High fashion has been interwoven with the rap game since its inception, whether it was the dapper Dan clad hustlers of the 90s, the drip pioneers of the 2000s Dipset, or the sophisticated styles of acts such as Kanye West, Lupe Fiasco, and Pharrell. Fashion has been an element of hip-hop since its inception. With his brand of fashion rap, Rocky and the A$AP Mob helped transform the streetwear scene of the early 2010s. The merging of high fashion and streetwear was already present on a smaller scale. Snapbacks, Tisa, starter jackets, Mitchell & Ness, fake Louis Vuitton belts, Goodwood necklaces, and Karmaloop-centric brands were popping. The internet underground and the A$AP Mob would transition the streetwear scene from the snapback and starter era into the high fashion centric era that still exists today. Many listeners garnered their first exposure to Raf Simons, Rick Owens, Hood Bayer, and Pyrex due to references and fits from the A$AP Mob. This new ilk of fashion rap birthed a generation of Instagram influencers, DIY fashion brands, and kickstarted Instagram as the unofficial home of getting fly. A$AP Rocky's debut project, Live Love A$AP, is the hallmark project of the fashion rap ecosystem, and an undisputed classic from the early internet underground. Vinny Chase, Ken Rebel, and Dominic Lord were other artists who thrived in the fashion rap world. To many, it appeared that the world flipped from Tisa to Rick Owens in an instant, but the flipping happened in the annals of the underground. Another example of the underground setting the trends of creative culture. The first golden age of the internet underground was a sprawling world with various niches and societies, eerily similar to the subgenres that exist today. However, the difference between then and now is the scale. In 2011, the underground was operating on a very small scale. Despite the small scale, the artists from the golden age had a legendary influence on the future generations. It was an era where 100,000 views was akin to going viral. The fans, artists, and contributors to the early underground scene were the early adopters. They were the fuel that powered the oncoming underground takeover. In the years that followed, the scene would reach unseen heights. The next era of the underground would be bigger and better. It was during 2013 and 2014 that the underground would transform from an upstart movement and become a full-scale revolution. Stars would emerge, legends would continue, and classics were being released on the daily. The golden age, or the initial phase of the internet underground, was an illustration of how a niche operated in the new internet age. Through the use of fresh social media, file sharing platforms, blogs, and forums, artists were able to single-handedly create their own waves within the hip-hop ecosystem. The early actors in the internet underground forged the blueprint for the future success of the scene. In the present day, the golden age of the internet underground should be reflected upon the same way most people reflect upon the 90s. It should be remembered as a time when continuous innovation and continuous boundary pushing was occurring. The OGs of the 2011 and 2012 golden age were the forefathers of this new era of rap. Without their revolutionary energy, the industry would be completely different. "2010, 2011, and 2012 were the years in which the underground community established itself as an eclectic blend of niches, personalities, and game-changing sounds. During the few years that followed, the underground community would exponentially grow and further establish itself as an ecosystem which was pushing the culture forward. During this growth phase, new stars would emerge, a plethora of collectives were formed, and a slew of virality would take the underground to near mainstream levels. 2013, 2014, and 2015 were growth years for the underground. The energy, sounds, aesthetic, and community were still similar to the inaugural years. The only thing that changed was the scale that it operated on. During these years, the social media apps and internet channels which the underground thrived on became ingrained in our daily lives. New platforms would emerge and create growth opportunities, namely SoundCloud and Vine, whilst the old guard of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Tumblr, online forums, and the blogosphere still played a vital role in spreading the internet underground agenda. Whilst 2013, 2014, and 2015 were years in which the underground continued its boom, it appeared that it was about to unravel. After reigning atop the scene and embarking upon one of the first nationwide tours in internet underground history, the Raider Clan inexplicably broke up. Key members Chris Travis, Xavier Wolf, Eddie Baker, Sky Lex, Jay Green, and Denzel Curry left the supergroup midway through 2013. Whilst the real reason behind the mass exodus varies, these artists were either hesitant to make it official with the Raider Clan, did not want to be associated with SpaceGhostPurrp, or they wanted to forge their own artistic paths. Regardless of what went down, the breakup was a heartbreaking moment in underground history. Raider Clan would still exist with a solid roster, and they would release a group album, Tales from the Underground, in 2013. But it would pale in comparison to the legendary roster of 2012. Nothing lasts forever, but the peak of the Raider Clan lasted just over a year. With their run ending so early, the original rendition of the Raider Clan is one of the biggest what-ifs of the underground era. Could they have brought the 90s revolution to the mainstream? Or were they simply too raw to be anything other than underground stalwarts? Luckily for underground fans, the fall of the Raider Clan led to the rise of a series of collectives which were led by ex-members. Using the blueprint Raider Clan created, these new collectives would create classic material and spawn several new underground stars. Arguably the most impactful collective from this chapter of underground history, or the most well known, came from European shores. Young Lean, Young Sherman, Young Good, Tyboy Digital, Echo 2K, and Blade, aka the SadBoys Drain Gang conglomerate, were living proof of how far-reaching the underground wave was. Drawing influence from the underground's host of innovators, the kids from Sweden took the underground to near mainstream levels. The crew of teenage Scandinavians burst onto the scene with Young Lean's viral hit, Ginseng Strip 2002. The orally pleasing beat, Lean's broken English references to Zooey Deschanel, and the ad hoc music video all combined to kickstart the SadBoys phenomena. From the outset, Young Lean was serving you with peak internet culture. Ginseng Strip was heavily memed and became popular to the masses in an ironic way, but just like Lil B cooking anthems, for every person who ridiculed what Lean was creating, he gained a person who understood and appreciated his art. Getting memed did not stop Young Lean and his crew at all. If anything, it fueled them and motivated them to take over. Following the instant success of Ginseng Strip 2002, Young Lean and his SadBoys didn't just have the internet on smash, they had infiltrated mainstream culture. In the blink of an eye, suburban kids had instantaneously transformed into Young Lean clones. They were dripped out in Nike hats, 3M windbreakers, and Versace rags, aka the unofficial SadBoy uniform. Lean's purveyance of underground rap and internet rap culture reached a tier of virality that was not yet seen in the underground realm. Fueled with the influence of underground OGs, Lean and the SadBoys acquired mainstream notoriety within months of releasing their first music video. The power of the internet was on full display, as was the potential of the underground sound. The rise of Young Lean and the mainstream notoriety he was able to acquire is one of the hallmark moments in underground history. It is viewed as one of the first moments in which the internet underground was witnessed at a near mainstream level. Young Lean and the SadBoys' popularity continued to skyrocket with the release of his debut project Unknown Memory 2002. This album produced another viral smash, Hurt. Lean managed to infiltrate a demographic that had never been in tune with the underground wave prior to his arrival. As crazy as it sounds, a group of Swedish teenagers were responsible for taking the internet underground to near mainstream levels. The power of memetics remains undefeated. Regardless of whether you think Lean's stardom was deserved, what Young Lean did with his newfound fame illustrated that he genuinely cared about the underground scene. Lean eschewed Goth Money Records as the opening act for his US tour and collaborated with them on several tracks. He also collabed with other underground OGs such as Metro Zoo, Bones, Rob Banks, and Denzel Curry. Lean and his homies did everything but sell out. Instead, they used their new platform to show love to the artists that influenced them. Lean's rise to stardom, no matter how bizarre it may have been, can be looked upon as a culture-shifting moment. The virality of Ginseng Strip brought the underground wave to unforeseen heights. Young Lean and the SadBoys were living proof that the internet underground was a global movement. The internet had already transformed the landscape for DIY musicians, and the Young Lean phenomenon showed that location no longer mattered. This movement has become a staple in the underground world, as Young Lean and his associates Blade, Young Sherman, Young Good, Echo 2K, and Tyboy Digital would go on to forge their own lanes in the creative world.
Big influences?
Yeah.
I like MF Doom, Big Baby Gandhi, Lil B, Trinidad James, Riff Raff, Lofty 305, shoutouts to Chief Keef. Shout out to Chief.
Just as the OGs from 2010 shifted the norms, broke barriers, and championed innovation, so did the stars of this new chapter. During 2013, 2014, and 2015, the underground grew to new heights. The influence, trend-setting abilities, and culture-shifting power the underground possessed became heavily prevalent during this time frame. Collectives or groups would define this epoch of the underground, as offshoots of the Raider Clan started their own takeover. These collectives would usher in their own brand of sounds, styles, and stars. Experimentation would continue to be the chieftain of the underground movement. The new collectives that were formed during this era would create a significant boom in the underground fan base. Born out of the Raider Clan's ashes, SESHOLLOWWATERBOYZ were the breakout stars of 2013. Consisting of Bones, Xavier Wolf, Chris Travis, and Eddie Baker, the quartet would merge their brooding sounds under one umbrella. Bones had become a known entity in the underground for his series of mixtapes under the moniker That Kid, and he was beginning to establish himself as a creative force. His dark, sparse, and angsty sounds meshed perfectly with Raider Clan defectors Chris Travis, Xavier Wolf, and Eddie Baker. The seamless chemistry between the group led to some of the best collaborative work the underground had seen. After a stellar run in which the respective members were releasing a series of solo work, Bones and Xavier Wolf released their debut collaborative mixtape entitled Lane. This project established SESHOLLOWWATERBOYZ as its own movement, and it sent their hype into the stratosphere. The tape is littered with anti-establishment thematics, drug endorsements, and some of the waviest sounds ever created. Lame was an instant classic. Eons and eons of classic material spawned from the SESHOLLOWWATERBOYZ collective. Chris Travis's mixtapes and EPs such as Hidden in the Mist, Gotham City, Born in the Winter, Silent of Me Eternally, Never Forget, and Seabeds with Bones are essential listens. Xavier Wolf's series of EPs Shut Up and Listen, Shut Up Be Quiet, To Be Continued, Damir Shizukani, and Caves illustrated Wolf's artistry and ability. Bones' solo releases during this era solidified him as one of the underground's cult heroes. His mixtapes Paid Programming, Cracker, Scumbag, Dead Boy, Teen Witch, and Garbage spread his anti-establishment messages. Their artistic output during this era was nothing short of prolific. Several singles such as Crunch Time, Weatherman, Castle Flutes, HDMI, and We Don't Believe You would catapult SHWB into one of the underground's biggest collectives. SESHOLLOWWATERBOYZ didn't reach the mimetic mainstream levels that Young Lean and the SadBoys did, but they were able to garner a die-hard fan base that was far greater than the traditional underground ecosystem. As independent artists, they broke into another echelon. From nationwide sold-out tours, in-demand merchandise, and highly anticipated music releases, SHWB transformed into an independent juggernaut during this era. The exposure they generated and the classics they released made it seem like their potential was limitless. The SESHOLLOWWATERBOYZ movement had hype, and they had the classic material to justify their hype. All members of SHWB have been active in the underground since its inception, but it was in 2013 that they broke out. Their growing fandom and army of loyal supporters illustrated how the underground was growing at an exponential rate. The rise of SHWB was more than being in the right place at the right time. Bones, Wolf, and Travis all possessed their own unique styles and sounds. Bones was the dreary old soul whose measured rhymes and deadpan flow could flip from referencing Aaron Carter to espousing his nihilistic views. Wolf evolved from being the clan's most proficient user of the triple time flow into a stream of consciousness rambler who spoke on whatever the fuck he wanted to speak on. Wolf's weed-smoking rhymes were tied together with rare anime references and avant-garde visions, whereas Travis continued to bring his Memphis swag, flow, and energy to his diverse beat selection. When the group collaborated, they often tackled the dreary, emotional, and sample-driven palette that features heavily throughout Bones' solo tapes. Whilst in their solo works, the members experimented and excelled over the many sounds that the underground had to offer. During this era, the SHWB wave was going full force. The Collective were the breakout acts of this underground period.
It's a reason why we the underground legends, nigga, and it's gonna stay like that to the end of time. We don't give a fuck if you recognize it or you say something, you know, pay that homage, or if you don't say shit at all and just go about your way, but bitch, you still know in your fucking head who the fuck we is and how the fuck we got to where we at and how the fuck you got to where you at, little nigga. Even the type to be like, oh, I started SoundCloud,
Right.
we was the
Fuck
first.
all
Shut the fuck up, nigga.
Fuck all that.
Because
You ain't-
everybody
yeah,
like, no,
nigga,
bro,
you
like,
just let everything.
did we
speak
do
for
that
itself.
shit when we was blowing SoundCloud up? Nigga, when we was the only
just
niggas
dropping
on
music.
SoundCloud, was we doing that shit?
We was just
Fuck
dropping
no,
music
nigga.
because
We
we
was just
love
dropping the
to
shit.
make music.
But also,
Yeah,
it's like if you were there, you know, type shit.
One of the new movements that took center stage during this era was Goth Money Records. Their eclectic art direction revolved around early 2000s flip phones, swerving Hondas, and flocking with the Gucci doves. Goth Money represented another stylistic evolution in the underground. During this period, the Goth Money roster consisted of Black Kray, MFK Marcy Main, Kane Groceries, 100 Mil, Luckaleen, and Karma. It was during this era where the crew would release the projects which would entrench their legacy. Luckaleen's Flexicon Mayor, MFK's Laheen, Kane Groceries Trap Goth, and Black Kray's Ice Cream and Mac 10s are the projects that catapulted their organic rise through the underground. The overarching storyline of this underground era was how several artists grew to heights beyond the underground. They had blown up. However, Goth Money countered this norm, as they were the torch carriers for the OGs of the scene. Their organic rise and their self-expressive DIY attitude embodied the principles of past legends of the underground. By acting like OGs, Goth Money carved out their own legacy. Collectives in the underground were varied. Some followed the Raider Clan archetype of maintaining a uniform aesthetic, whereas other collectives were boundaryless, allowing its members to purvey anything. Some lasted and others burnt out instantly, but within these collectives were a bevy of generational stars. The collective era of the underground was pivotal in giving upstart artists their first dose of exposure. It gave the underground a renewed identity in the post-Raider Clan world. The eclectic sounds, aesthetics, and ethos that were pioneered by these movements would etch a new chapter in underground history and stimulate a period of exponential growth that would set the platform for future generations to succeed. The collectives that formed during this era were nothing short of iconic. The aforementioned SHWB, Goth Money Records, and SadBoys were just some of the pivotal movements of this time frame. Jay Green's Schemer Posse, Key Nyada and Magnet's Thrax House, Suicide Boys, Doom Shop, the early days of Working on Dying, Divine Council, Buffet Boys, and Awful Records are other collectives that thrived during this era. These groups had rosters of stars and generational talents. Cold Heart, Lil Tracy aka Young Bruh, Wicker Phase, Horsehead, and Nadab would emerge from the Thrax House ecosystem. Lil Peep, Ghostmane, and Craig Zen were a part of the Schemer Posse movement. Playboy Cardi, Father, Abra, and Tommy Genesis were some of the standout stars from Awful Records, whilst Fat Nick and Puya represented the Buffet Boys. It can't be disputed that these collectives played an instrumental role in giving these future stars their first opportunities to change the game. It was during this era that producers began to get their deserved shine. Producers were the driving force of the genre-bending sounds that fueled the underground. The vocal chop horror of Phonk, the ethereal nihilism of cloud rap, and the clanging 808s of underground trap were masterminded by the producers of the underground. The genius of the DIY producer was on full display during this era. Just as rappers laid the platform for future generations of underground stars, the producers of this era birthed a wave of instrumental geniuses. DJ Smokey, Eric Dingas, DJ Killer C, HNRK, Young Sherman, Young Good, Jesus 3, Perp Dog, and Big Los were some of the producers who were dominating the underground sound waves. DJ Smokey's solo tapes, collab tapes, and Eric Dingas's instrumental tapes are essential listens from this era. Another burgeoning movement which had tie-ins with the internet rap movement was Vaporwave. One of the biggest mimetic forces during this period, many internet users have a surface level experience with Vaporwave. This was due to the virality of Macintosh Plus's project, Floral Shop. Within the confines of the Vaporwave experience exist classic projects from producers such as Contact Lens, Drip133, Chuck Person, Saint Pepsi, and many more. Vaporwave shares a plethora of alumni with the underground rap scene, and its influence on the aesthetic, sounds, and imagery of the mainstream nearly mirrors the underground rap scene's influence in the same areas. The underground rap scene birthed an era of stream of consciousness chaotic rap, whilst the Vaporwave scene birthed an era of DIY DJ screws. Although Vaporwave was a movement which was completely separate from the underground rap scene, it was another illustration of how the new Web 2.0 landscape created revolutionary culture shifts. The emergence of musical movements and development of niches was not exclusive to underground rap. The rapid rise of the internet would alter the music meta in many different genres. In the early underground, an artist's Web 2.0 toolkit was fairly limited. Lil B had MySpace, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and file sharing sites to spread his base doctrine. During this era, the only feasible way to stream music was via YouTube, DatPiff, or streaming local files through media players such as iTunes. On-demand streaming was in its infancy. As the underground switched eras, so did the amount of internet platforms. The emergence of SoundCloud changed the game for online musicians. SoundCloud gave artists the chance to share their tracks directly to a streaming platform without any major hurdles. The seamless streaming experience for the user was revolutionary. It made discovering underground gems easier than ever. YouTube gave artists a chance. SoundCloud gave artists the opportunity to soar. Underground rappers and producers were amongst the first to adopt the platform as their home. This was years before the sensationalist term SoundCloud rapper came to fruition. These early underground adopters laid the platform for the SoundCloud explosion that occurred later on. In terms of establishing an artistic aesthetic, Tumblr reinforced itself as one of the kingpins. However, Instagram rose to rival Tumblr as one of the chief platforms for artistic expression. The arrival of streaming platforms and new social media avenues gave upcoming artists even more opportunities to build their image, connect with others, and to share their story. But there was one social media platform that allowed artists to reach levels of virality that they had never seen before. This platform was Vine. Vine was a video sharing platform which gave users the ability to upload 6-second loops. This was TikTok before TikTok. The upstart platform gave birth to several Vine anthems, some of which were underground classics, most notably Chris Travis's Crunch Time and Black Cray's Iced Out Castles. Vine and the other burgeoning social media platforms offered growth opportunities for underground artists. These opportunities were embraced and led to the exponential growth of the underground scene during this era. Hip-hop as an entity was re-emerging as the youth's go-to genre. 2013 and 2014 were years in which Atlanta further entrenched itself as a hotbed of trap greatness. Several of the genre's modern superstars had their breakthrough moments during these years. Migos, Young Thug, Pee Wee Longway, and many other stars of the ATL street scene changed the perception of what could reach mainstream airwaves. Migos' YRN, Young Thug's 1017 Thug, Pee Wee Longway's Blue Eminem, and Gucci Mane's World War III had the blogosphere in a chokehold and the streets on lock. Noisy's series of videos, which weirdly attempted to hipsterize the Atlanta trap lifestyle, exhibits several key actors of the legendary trap scene. Much like the underground, rap music as a whole was obtaining a rarefied energy. Migos and Young Thug would reach mainstream heights based on their transcendent work in the mixtape scene. However, the path to mainstream notoriety remained fairly traditional. Rap and the music industry was still operating with its traditional playbook. Attempt to blow up, sign to a major, and leave the fate of your success in the hands of a major label. The industry was yet to adjust to the power of streaming, and they were yet to adjust to the internet era of music as a whole, something that would change in the years that followed. Entering 2015, the underground was a fairly new entity. The OGs had established the wave. Descendants of the OGs ushered in a period of continued growth, and it was time for the internet children to continue the underground's ascent. These internet children would do just that. With plug music, the youngins would create a subgenre that would catapult the underground to unseen heights and garner mainstream attention. Plug music became Gen Z's Lil B moment, a moment of sonic awakening. However, the increased attention on internet artists in 2015, especially when compared to 2010, meant that this sonic awakening happened on a far larger scale. The mimetic effect of the internet had quintupled. The rise of plug music was the culmination of everything that happened in the prior history of the underground. The new generation of stars were inspired by pioneers of the underground and utilized the pathways that the OGs had forged to start their own revolution, their own underground wave. Plug music broke through the underground ceiling and became the industry-defining sound for its time. Love it or hate it, plug music and its originators have deep ties to the original internet underground. The music industry's adaptation of the internet wave had been teased since the early 2010s, and it finally came to fruition once plug music took over. Plug music is the sound that defines the mid-2010s, but who can be considered the originators of the plug sound? Plug music's sonic origins can be traced back to the late 2000s work of Gucci Mane and Zaytoven. Zaytoven's sultry keys and bright melodies were the perfect companion for Gucci Mane's Forthright Street Diaries. Producers took influence from the bright sounds of 2000s trap music, whilst rappers amalgamated Chief Keef's slurry, ad hoc and ad-lib littered flow, bright sounds from the past merged with modern flows to form the plug music avalanche. The originators of the plug sound is a controversial subject. Some believe it was the Atlanta trio of Uno the Activist, Thousand Band Fawny, and Playboy Carti, aka Splur Gang, while some argue that it was Dallas-based artist Diego Money. What can't be disputed, however, are the producers who pioneered the plug wave, Mexico Dro and the Beat Plugs, a producer collective which included Stupid Cool, Corey Lingo, Polo Boy Shorty, and ASAT. Their Zaytoven-inspired melodies collided with muddy 808s to create a sound that encapsulated a generation. The simplicity and catchiness of their sound is something that remains unmatched throughout underground history. Mexico Dro and the Beat Plugs would launch the careers of several stars and produce for some of the rap game's biggest acts. The Beat Plugs are one of the most underappreciated and underrated producer groups of all time. Their influence on the rap world has been immense. The Beat Plugs were the creators of the plug sound, and a new generation of rappers would bring their plug sound to life. The first artist to adopt the beat plug sound may be a contentious subject, but you can't deny the role Splur Gang played in making plug music a viable entity. Their early drops, Every Since and Splur Gang, set the tone for the plug wave. Bright beats, a variety of flows, and a thematic focus on drugs, fresh clothes, scamming, and hoes. In its early days, plug music seemed to be an evolution of the fashion or swag rap that ASAP pioneered in the early 2010s. But instead of ripping Black Scale and reviving the 90s Southern sound whilst rocking Rick Owens, the youngins were reviving Zaytoven's sounds of the 2000s and elevating the hype around Supreme and Palace to abnormal levels. 2015 was the founding year of the plug revolution. Several iconic tapes, artists, and moments were spawned during this year. 2015's plug wave was the calm before the storm. In the years that followed, the underground as we knew it would become a part of the industry. Playboy Carti's series of singles, also known as the Red Artwork era, illustrated that Carti was a star in the making, and that plug music was the sound of the future. Timeless singles such as Money Counter, Death in Tune, Chill, Young Zanho, Heavy, and By Myself, No Help, established Carti as one of the hottest commodities in the rap game. These singles, the majority of which were produced by Mexico Dro, were instant classics and catapulted the plug rap wave into the stratosphere. Many listeners' first memories of SoundCloud came from listening to a Red Artwork classic. Carti's star power became obvious as he linked up with Awful Records and was rumoured to be the face of ASAP Rocky's AWGE collective. Carti's initial releases spread through the internet underground like wildfire. it became clear that he was destined for stardom. These red artwork singles made him the face of the SoundCloud movement and a pioneer of the plug music wave. Uno and Phonk further established the momentum of the plug wave. Their SoundCloud singles Parkin' Lot Pimpin' and Throwed expounded upon the rise of plug music. Their collaborative EP, For Christ's Sake, entrenched them as pioneers. Thousand Band Phonk's melodic styling and Uno's frenetic punch-in flow merged to create one of the most iconic duos in underground history. The plug ecosystem burst open after Splur Gang brought light to the sound. Seemingly every time you logged into SoundCloud, you would discover a plug gem. The amount of hits and underground anthems that were on SoundCloud during this era was unmatched. During 2015, SoundCloud was like an endless scroll of revolutionary content. As mentioned previously, the plug music takeover was a shift of consciousness, similar to the bass takeover of the early 2010s. The plug wave entrenched SoundCloud as the home of internet rap. By 2015, the internet had become ingratiated in the daily lives of nearly every demographic. As a result, those who consume music on the internet grew rapidly. The bright, melodic sounds and rockstar image of plug music made it an appealing subgenre for the youth who lived on the internet at the time. This increased scale and broader fandom of the plug subgenre spawned several superstars. Artists such as Lil Yachty, Lucky, Doo-Wop Kane, Candy Paint, Kevin Pilari, Warhols, Big Baby Scumbag, K Supreme, ATL Smook, Ma 90s, Swag Hollywood, Made in Tokyo, Larry League, Wintertime, Rushy Bands, Slime Cedo, Young Bands, Terrence Escobar, and many more artists burst onto the scene during the initial plug wave. Superstars, underground legends, and artists that had superstar potential were all emerging during the plug revolution. These artists made SoundCloud a must-visit destination. The return of the DJ during this era further fueled the SoundCloud takeover, as emerging DJs such as DJ Fat and DJ Renaissance started to drop plug exclusives for the SoundCloud streets. The Dat Piff days of Don Cannon and DJ Drama were back in full effect. 2015 was the founding year of the plug revolution. The 2 years which followed were the years in which the wave completely took over the music industry. Despite the impending takeover of plug music, 2015 was still another hallmark year for the underground. The OGs were thriving and the new generation was shining. This made 2015 one of the rarest years in underground history. The game wasn't fucked up yet, but we didn't realize things would unravel so quickly.
See, the Atlanta scene is the homegrown of this new generation. That's the that's the birthplace of the new generation.
One of the main storylines of 2015 was SpaceGhostPurrp's resurrection in Atlanta. Entering 2015, Purrp's career was in flux. Initially, he broke through as the underground messiah, and later he was crucified as a pariah during the ASAP and Raider Klan fallouts. Purrp continued to drop classic material such as BMW, Intoxicated, and Winter's Mine, but his abrasive personality forced him to be blackballed from the music industry. However, a fairly secretive move to Atlanta in 2015 rebirthed Purrp's relevance in the underground scene. In Atlanta, SGP linked up with Jug God and the Fuck 12 movement. This connection gave him a foothold in the Atlanta underground, where the plug scene had started to boom. Purrp's resurgence began with the haunting Bloody Mary video. The dark track and the glitched out video restored the vintage SpaceGhostPurrp feeling. Purrp was re-establishing himself atop the underground totem pole. He had established links with Uno the Activist, Thousand Band Phonk, and Goth Money Records. Considering these factors, Purrp's comeback was on the right path. His return to form created a rarefied energy in the underground scene. He would cement this comeback with another iconic moment, the release of Terror Gang. Terror Gang is one of the greatest songs in underground history, the ultimate posse cut. Terror Gang embodies the rawness, the unity, and the bevy of talent that existed in the underground during 2015. Kane Groceries, Mr. Splurge, Polari, Thousand Band Phonk, Black Kray, and SGP exchanged verses over a menacing SpaceGhostPurrp instrumental. The music video, which was shot by Dreams, was a hallmark moment. Terror Gang was the peak of Purrp's Atlanta era. He placed himself firmly back into the underground hierarchy. However, old beef would ensure he remained blackballed forever. Goth Money Records were the breakthrough act of 2013 and established themselves as legends in 2015. Their ability to continuously innovate, present new styles, and introduce new aesthetics made them pioneers in the underground. Goth Money Records' influence on the new age of plug rappers was evident. The underground group also had a stint in Atlanta. Whilst in Atlanta, they linked up with several heavy hitters such as Polari and Awful Records. 2015 was a prosperous year for the Goth Money clique. It was also the year Goth Money introduced us to their extended family of artists, including a group of producers who would go on to take over the entire rap game. Working on Dying burst onto the scene in 2015 as one of Goth Money's most prodigious producers. The Philadelphia-based producer group's trademark sound was their German keyboard, Tangerine Dream-inspired soundscapes. In conjunction with Guala Gang and Goth Money, Working on Dying were crafting game-changing fire. WOD's initial break into the underground scene occurred in 2014, when the collective landed a handful of notable placements, including Oogie Mane's production for Lil Uzi Vert's Whippin', and a series of placements with Goth Money Records. A symbiotic relationship was developing between WOD, Goth Money Records, and Guala Gang. The collectives would continue to create magic throughout 2015. In late 2015, Working on Dying would reinvent the underground sound again by introducing the frenetic tread subgenre, a sound which would dominate the underground. Working on Dying's emergence adds to the legacy of 2015, especially when you consider the heights they have reached since. Awful Records were another hallmark act of 2015. The Atlanta-based crew championed the DIY ethos that the underground was founded upon. Awful Records consisted of artists such as Father, Abra, Tommy Genesis, Slug Christ, Lord Nav, Keith Charles Spacebar, Ethereal, Archibald Slim, Rich Poe Slim, and for a limited time, Playboy Cardi. Each member of the Awful Records army had their own standout projects and collaborations under the Awful umbrella. Awful Records spawned a plethora of gems and must-listen material. Their solid projects and a handful of viral hits such as Father's Nokia and the mega hit Wrist, featuring Key and I Love McConan, gave Awful Records a considerable amount of buzz amongst the blogosphere behemoths Pitchfork, Vader, and Vice. Awful Records offered an alternative to the burgeoning plug scene, as their DIY sounds tackled several sonic landscapes and encapsulated a variety of flows. Although the collective never reached the heights they deserved, their impact and their music has stood the test of time. Divine Council, an underground group which consisted of Icy Twat, Silk Money, Cyrax, and Lord Linko, were another batch of artists to have a breakout during this era. Viral hits, a record deal with Epic Records, and a rare Andre 3000 feature had poised the group to make the leap from underground standouts to mainstream players. Although Divine Council never made this leap, their role in bringing more eyes and ears to the internet underground during this era cannot be understated. The rest of the underground was evolving and growing at a prolific rate. Every ecosystem in the underground was thriving. New stars were emerging and new fans were appearing in droves. 2015 was a banner year for several underground ecosystems, and many of these ecosystems became big enough to transform into self-sufficient entities. Instagram would solidify itself as the home of micro-influencers, fashion influencers, and lifestyle influencers. As it pertains to the rap world, Instagram's awakening played a major role in increasing the growth of the underground. The hip-hop world and the fashion world go hand in hand. On Instagram, fashion influencers and underground artists would form together like Voltron. Fashion influencers were vital in proliferating the plug wave of 2015. Artists and influencers created a community in which the influencers acted as tastemakers, and the artists provided the soundtrack, the fuel to their lifestyle. Instagram is a bastion of the internet generation's materialism, a highlight reel of life per se. And in 2015, this reputation was enhanced as two behemoths of excess, the rap world and the fashion world, combined to stimulate further growth for the underground sound. In the mainstream, rap's resurgence was in full effect. Highlights of 2015 include Future's Godlike mixtape run, Lil Uzi Vert's breakthrough project Lover's Rage, and Young Thug's continued ascent into the mainstream cauldron. Rap music as a whole was thriving, and the industry's willingness to adjust to the streaming era ensured its dominant run was slated to continue. This new dawn of rap's popularity was fueled by what the mainstream sensationalized as mumble rap. 2015 was a banner year for the underground. Heading into 2016, it became evident that the underground was no longer an internet niche. The sound, imagery, and swag that were birthed in the underground were becoming a part of the mainstream. 2016 is the year where the industry takeover of the underground occurred. It was the year where everything changed. The DIY creatives who pioneered the internet wave became sought after by the music industry machine. The music industry was about to oversaturate the underground we all loved. Despite this oversaturation, 2016 was not inauspicious, as classic material was still being dropped. The feeling was just not the same. The underground community was fractured. It felt like any artistic innovations made in the underground were going to be imitated by the industry. The real underground OGs slipped back into the trenches of the internet, whilst the new generation of industry-ready artists would reach levels of global stardom and become some of the biggest rappers in the music world. A generational shift was happening. Gen Z were faithful consumers of the internet underground, and they brought its visions to the mainstream. The industry takeover of the underground incorporates many factors. There was the standard practice of existing mainstream artists taking inspiration from underground innovators. This mainstream adaptation of counterculture had been commonplace throughout several eras of music history. But what defined the industry takeover of 2016 was the music industry's desire to capture and override the internet music wave. The internet wave was something that the industry had largely ignored up until 2015. Record labels had finally realized streaming, online artistry, and the underground sound had the potential to become a profitable pursuit. The industry's pursuit of what became known as the SoundCloud rapper led to an endless list of artists getting signed. Almost overnight, the visions, sounds, and aesthetics, which were championed in the underground, became ingrained in the music industry's toolkit. This takeover had the potential to be a crowning moment, but for many underground fans, this signaled the beginning of the end. This is because several of the original innovators, creators, and pioneers that pushed the culture forward did not reap the rewards of the underground reaching the mainstream frontier. The industry took the underground source, but never paid homage to the ones that started the wave they were about to profit from. A generational shift also contributed to the underground movement losing its essence. 2015's Plug Wave marked the arrival of a new generation into the underground scene. This plug generation were the artists who received the majority of the industry's interest. For those outsiders, or those who pervade the other sounds that existed within the underground sphere, it felt like the game was rigged. The game was fucked up. OGs who had pioneered the platforms that the new generation used were on the outside looking in. A new generation of artists, an industry invasion, and a style-stealing pandemic had core underground fans in a state of fatigue. Internet music was shifting from a DIY environment into an industry machine. This shift had consequences for the underground, its legacy, and its notoriety. Stars were made, new artists were getting signed at an alarming rate, whilst the majority of underground legends weren't getting the recognition they deserved.
The people really just catching on this shit I've been doing like 3-4 years ago. It's all good though.
Upon its inception, the internet underground felt like a refreshing escape from the mundane nature of mainstream music. In 2016, the industry impeded upon this real estate and turned the internet music space into a conveyor belt that was littered with fake views, fake followers, and imitators of the original source. The underground OGs responded to this invasion by retreating further into the trenches of the internet. The Unda, or the underworld, was born, and a new era of internet rap lore began. The original internet underground was founded upon the principles of counterculture, and in 2016, this counterculture ethos continued. The game was now fucked up, but the soldiers continued to prove who the true innovators in the music world were. Tread music was one of the biggest breakthroughs during the Unda period. Entering 2016, Working on Dying had established a symbiotic relationship with certified legends Goth Money Records, Booty Chain, and Laguni Chonga. WOD were the emerging stars of 2015, and the collective of producers would entrench themselves in 2016. In conjunction with the aforementioned legends, Working on Dying would reinvent the underground with tread music. Tread music was a high-tempo frenzy, with frenetic drum patterns, pounding bass, and OST-worthy melodies. Couple these frenetic soundscapes with the dynamism of Black Kray, aka Sick Boy Rari, Goth Money Records, Wildla Gang, and Five Finger Posse, and you have a recipe for a revolution. Working on Dying, Goth Money, Wildla Gang, and Five Finger Posse broke tread through to the underground scene. It was only a matter of time until other artists adopted the sound. Artists such as Chopo, Wi-Fi God, The Khan, Lil Tracy, and many more would contribute to the tread sound. A plethora of tread classics were churned out during this era, both full-length projects and singles, such as Working Out the Mud, Shitty Sick Boy, 215+1, Wi-Fi Season, and Trenches to Riches. Couple these projects with a plethora of viral singles and you have a full-blooded sonic revolution. The tread era was an extremely important movement. It allowed the underground to regain its identity, regain its sound, and its presence. The tread movement exemplified the transcendent talent that Working on Dying possessed. The purveyors of the tread sound would proceed to take over the rap game in the years that followed. SpaceGhostPurrp entered 2016, once again a vilified entity. That wouldn't stop him from being an overlord of the Unda. After the ups and downs of Purp's Atlanta era, he would form Black Money Boys, aka B&B. This new collective would kickstart trap metal and take the dark sound to new heights. The roster consisted of several artists, producers, and creatives. Notable members of B&B included Chopo, Loco Lows, Evil Haze, I Am Pissed, Screw Main Flame, Taco L, Margin Bloody, and Seda. The Unda was reinvigorated with the presence of B&B. B&B's evil and dark sound was typified by SpaceGhostPurrp's Black Land Radio 2. The chilling, cold, dark, and sparse sounds of the project is arguably Purrp's most twisted work yet. The demented masterpiece, Chopo's plethora of projects, and the demonic sounds of the B&B producers made the B&B movement a staple of this new underground era. B&B's dark trap or trap metal sound ushered in a new wave of Memphis-esque darkness into the underworld. Black Money Boys was a defiant response to another saga of SpaceGhostPurrp's beef with the world. Holistically, the underground was still adjusting to the industry's involvement. Some blew up and others would remain in the under. Artists who emerged as bona fide stars included Lil Tracy, Lil Peep, XXXTentacion, Ski Master Slump God, Denzel Curry, Lil Pump, Trippie Redd, Juice WRLD, and the Suicide Boys. Artists who ensured the various underground ecosystems were thriving included Trip Dixon, Big Man, Drippin' So Pretty, 2004, Wi-Fi God, Lil Zally, Curb Lagoop, P2 the Gold Mask, Cyber, Anti-World, High C, Nolan B. Rollin, Spooky Lee, Star Fox LaFleur, Lazy God, and several others who resided on the trenches of the internet. The astronomical rise in popularity of underground music led to these previously mentioned ecosystems becoming full-fledged empires. There were a litany of classic shows, collaborations, and iconic moments occurring on the regular. The industry invasion of the underground and its surge in popularity just made it harder to find the realness. As mentioned previously, industrialization of the underground occurred in response to the shifting macro picture of the music world. Streaming, like the rise of the MP3 in the 2000s, had become the preferred way to consume music. The part digital, part physical formula of the music world was no longer the meta. Migration to digital real estate was occurring at a rapid rate. With dedicated streaming services such as Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, Tidal, and YouTube becoming a part of our daily lives, it was necessary for the music industry to adjust to the streaming era. Curated playlists, algorithm manipulation, payola opportunities, and an adjustment to how album sales were calculated made the internet music sphere industry ready. With internet-only rollouts feasible, record labels began signing artists en masse. The internet wave was now the industry wave. The rising popularity of YouTube-based platforms such as Elevator, Lyrical Lemonade, and No Jumper further fueled the purveyance of the new generation of industry-ready underground stars. Kreayshawn was living proof of how the music industry had struggled to adjust to the internet era. In 2011, they didn't know how to manage internet stars. Post 2016, however, record labels were taking internet stars and turning them into mainstream supernovas. A paradigm shift had occurred. In conclusion, the industry invasion of the underground sound, style, and aesthetic was an inevitability. What couldn't be forecasted was at the speed at which the industry invasion happened. Within months, the industry had infiltrated the internet music space. Lil Pump exploded on a mainstream level with his Lil B shtick, and several other artists had reached mainstream heights whilst taking influence from the internet underground. Post 2016 has been a great yet confusing period for music, both from an original underground perspective and a new industry underground perspective. The production quality of music, videos, and interviews reach heights which were previously unimaginable, but the content and the soul of the movement feels like it has lost its essence. Despite the continuous innovation of underground artists, it became apparent that the real legends of the game weren't going to get the flowers, fame, and shine they deserve. The industry was littered with Black Kray imitators, Young Bruh imitators, SpaceGhostPurrp influenced producers, Chief Keef imitators, Lil B imitators, and Playboi Carti imitators. These imitators were creating a watered down product. During this era, it was obvious that the industry was pushing forth a cookie cutter version of the underground sound we love, a version which didn't pay homage to those who paved the way. Post 2016, hip hop once again has entrenched itself as one of the most popular genres in the world. Its resurgence was buoyed by styles, sounds, and aesthetics which had been created in the underground. The industry takeover of the underground wasn't some crescendo moment for the creatives who toiled away on the trenches of the internet. Instead, it was a moment of frustration. Luckily, the OG sleuths of the internet movement were able to reinvent themselves and pioneer sonic revolutions such as the Tread movement. This era is bittersweet. The underground wave and its influence was bigger than ever, but it feels like many legends will not be etched in history as the revolutionaries that they are. The underground is no longer a small community with tight-knit ecosystems and niches. Instead, it has transformed into a sprawling, large-scale civilization. Over a decade since Lil B's rise to infamy, SpaceGhostPurrp's spell of mystic darkness, A$AP Rocky's splash of braggadocio, Odd Future's defiant displays of teen angst, and Chief Keef's forthright street prophecies, the internet underground has its roots firmly bound in today's mainstream rap game. In retrospect, the early 2010s was the formative movement for the modern day revival of the rap game. It championed artistic concepts, sounds, styles, and pushed boundaries that are still being explored today. It inspired a generation to be different, to do shit themselves, and present an unabashed stream of their consciousness. The internet underground was the revolution only a handful of people bore witness to, whilst the masses noticed the evolution many years later. The internet underground and its many communities were the vamps before they became known, the Rick Owens aficionados before it got played out, the Memphis revivalists before it was gentrified by New Age Phonk, and the Based Boys before shit got too political. They were the first adopters of the swag which shifted the creative consciousness of the world. The internet underground was the home of everything before it became cool. It should be enshrined as one of the true golden ages of music history. The early internet underground brought source, swag, and eons of influence to the world. Without a doubt, the internet underground was and still is a special movement. It should never be forgotten. The barren wasteland of broken links, missing mixtapes, deleted accounts, and missing posts need to somehow be resurrected, restored, and remembered. This movement needs to be preserved, spoken on, and taught. There are viral tweets that occur every few months reminiscing on the underground movement, but the pioneers deserve so much more. They deserve their flowers and an opportunity to provide an insight into the waves they created. Who knows what the future holds for the underground? Just know your favorite rapper's favorite rapper either came from or was inspired by the internet underground. This wasn't J. Cole. This was that swagged up shit. That mystical shit. That bass shit. That wavy shit. This was the underground. The underground spirit still exists as several artists and collectives continue to evolve the niches or ecosystems that existed in prior eras of the underground. The now disbanded Slaywell collective spawned the careers of several superstars, including Yeet, Summers, and Can. Surf Gang and Nova Gang embody the DIY ethos that the underground was founded upon. Acid Soulja, Xavier So Based, Chris Too Easy, and their affiliated artists and producers are reviving the chaos of the based movement. Cemetery took Black Cray's Witch House inspired era, added a country farmer aesthetic, and carved out his own niche. Glock 40 Spaz, Osama Sun, 1AM, Smoking Skull, Dirtball, and their affiliated artists are the future of the street underground sound. RX Puppy and RXK Nephew have become the dynamic duo of the underground in recent years. Tony Snow and 10K Dunking are keeping the spirit of the original plug scene alive. Artists such as BK the Ruler, Bloody Clip, Hook, and Baby Sosa have put on for women in the new underground era, whilst Carti's Opium label takes the power of memetics to unseen heights. Glitchcore, Hyperpop, Sigglecore, Plug B&B, and Rage music, subgenres which have had TikTok zoomers in a trance, whilst underground OGs such as Black Kray aka Sick Boy Rari, DJ Smokey, Blade, Doo-Wop Kane, and Cartier God's cult followings have grown exponentially. The rap boom is still evident, and it doesn't look like slowing down. In fact, it appears that the internet underground and its many communities are as popular as ever. The underground scene has transferred from generation to generation. Although the pioneers of the late 2000s and 2010s may not be celebrated as the legends they are, their legacy needs to be remembered. The pioneers laid the foundation for the internet takeover. The current rap empire was built in the annals of the internet underground.